We all have series we like, and they may or may not already have games for them. And for the ones that don't, what if they did? And if it's an anime series, I'm sorry, they probably won't have a good one, or one to begin with. So some things aren't cut out for games, and here's why I think so. So some series are a little too complicated. A lot of anime series have these really intricate power systems with very specific rules that don't really mesh with games structure. And what I mean by that is implementation. So one character's side ability, like a side character's ability, is probably an entire game in its own, as like a simulation, sort of like almost sandbox area where everything is intricately designed to interact with that superpower or that ability, right? To some people having the most boring ability known to man, which is like, I punch people with magic power, right? And having that be interesting and implementable in a game is not impossible without it being like fair or heavily extrapolated. And this is why a lot of anime games end up being a fighting game. You can take all these super OP abilities and turn them into just like cutscene super moves. So they're technically in the game. But that's oftentimes not really enough. It ends up being flat, and that roster tends to be quite small or very big, and then just like cut and paste it together. I think some of the biggest anime series that have video games, like Naruto and Dragon Ball, those always have fighting games, and they'll almost always have a game because the actual rules of the series are so adaptable, and there's a lot of range to work with. Because you've just got dudes who can fly, punch, kick, and shoot lasers in different flavors, and then they like transform and get different 3D models and hair or whatever. It's very easy to do. Gacha games, super simple to fill out your pool of roster and get some money out of people because people recognize their favorite characters, and all these abilities can be extrapolated into an RPG system that's very simple, and have them be super broken, and just name the ability what it's called in the series, which is also quite flat. And that's why a lot of these anime games either suck or they're just a bit samey, because it has to fit within reasonable games development. Another thing is that the core of a show is not, or a show or series rather, is not actually great for participating. So in a sense that you are the player and you are moving along the game by playing. You're pressing buttons, you're killing dudes, you're doing whatever, right? And the series as a whole is popular because people like watching it, or people like experiencing it as a book or a film. And you being the main character actually kind of takes away from that experience. It's a bit closed-minded to constantly mention like anime or like Eastern media. But I'm sorry, like all my solo leveling people, like, dude, hype or a moment, it's not a video game. It's never gonna happen, you know? And all the boring things that your cool main character does is probably going to be the game. Which is ironic, being that the series actually places the main character with a progression system from a video game in the real world, and yet it doesn't work as a video game, which is really strange to say. But he's in Fortnite. I mean, I'll talk about that later. But he's in Fortnite. I guess you can have your aura moment while you shoot some bots or like little kids. I don't know. Up to you. And one of the last reasons as to why adapting other source media into a game is oftentimes not really good is because it's not adding anything to the source material. Classic examples are like back in the 2010s when a lot of these action films would get movie tie-ins, like our early day superhero stuff. You'd get like Iron Man on PSP, DS, Xbox 360, and like PS3, right? And you're like, what the hell? And most of them are just like, hey, it's the movie in stills, and then here are some levels with some game mechanics. It's like, sure, but it doesn't emulate the same feeling as the film, or it doesn't add anything to the film experience that is really notable. Um, which partly why cinematic games actually exist now, where you have that choice inputted into something where you're still spectating, but your spectatorship is now more personal because you've made decisions. Interestingly, I will actually mention cinematic games in the next bit when we're going in reverse, where we're making films out of video games or external media. So going from video games to other medium like books, film mostly, like watchable formats, we find that the same story beats can be repeated in film form, but they don't hit as hard because we are not making the choices. Okay, from a grander perspective, technically we're not making the choices at all. But generally speaking, there's a level of, for lack of a better word at the moment without being too technical, there's a level of intimacy that we have with the media because we are controlling the character to some extent and making these choices, right? But when we're watching it and the same moment happens, it's not the same because we are not dropped in directly. We're actually experiencing the same emotional takeaway, but through the lens of another character, which can actually be beneficial when adapting things. For example, Fallout. I personally haven't watched it, but I think part of the reason why it's such a successful adaptation is because you can just take a main character, pretend you're actually playing Fallout, and then just make all the story choices, and then make that the show. Matter of fact, you could go the other way. You can make all the choices, and then fit the character around that. So then it's a more cohesive and well put together adaptation of what Fallout would feel like in movie form. Compared to other things, I haven't watched Devil May Cry, but 90% of the reason why I think Dante is cool is because I'm watching him, and then they give me the controller, and I can do Dante shit. You know what I mean? I can, like, throw a dude in the air, put, like, 9 million bullets in him, turn into, like, you know, Devil Trigger, and do all this shit, right? I think I'm cool when I do that. And I guess maybe they tried to tone the cool level down and try and put a little more plot, which is kind of why that adaptation doesn't really work, because the plot in Devil May Cry is usually just big dude shows up, kill big dude, hype aura moment in between, you know? Which is not interesting to watch, but it's interesting to play. Though a similar thing can actually happen with games that actually have little to no narrative and are purely gameplay, in the sense that you can just take the setting and some of the world stuff and then make your own story out of it. Think the Sonic film. Like, Sonic has had some level of narrative. Very, very, like, nothing too complex. But you can throw in, like, human characters. They've done it before. And you could just take the basic story beats and world mechanics and then just make your own movie out of it. It's been interesting enough and it's been faithful enough, so it works. It's the same thing with the Mario film, where Mario games don't really have that much narrative, depending on the entry. But you can just take all the world's interesting characters and the actual visual style of it, and then just make your own movie out of it, and you'll be fine. Which is, like, I mean, it's reasonable. It's not for me. I think it's just one of those, like, multimedia things where I'm like, I think I'll only get it if I vaguely care about Mario, or if I'm like a child, so I'm okay. But it's not the worst way of adapting things. My personal, like, gripe with this really is when there's cross-media adaptation. I say cross-media, but it's like cross-platform stuff. I'm trying to make it sound smart, but honestly, it's just like Fortnite stuff and like the Fortnite-ification of things, or Funko rather, really, if we really go out there, where it's just like, visually, this is a thing that you like. You can get it now. I'm like, I'm good, you know? I think it's hilarious that people are being drip-fed VTubers from Fortnite, but it's lazy, man. It's really just a money thing, and I'm not a fan, you know? They've put things I like in Fortnite, I'll be honest, like Kafka is there, but it 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 doesn't. It's not very deep, right? And ultimately, you kind of want to have a little more from the media that you're consuming, right? Which is why I find it so interesting that there are cinematic games, because as an industry and as an art form, we're looking at our predecessors to adapt and create new ways to experience things. Um, and it's just like a bit like just jangling keys in my face, which is really demeaning, and that's kind of why I wanted to make a video about like adapting games, um, because it's weaponizing almost your interest in things, and I don't agree with it at all, unless you can do something interesting with it.